Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Joseph Mogel here again. A couple more tips here for you writers out there. All right, so my last set of videos, I kind of droned on for quite a few about contracts and contract law. Boring, not fun, but necessary. Unfortunately, there's some more boring stuff that has to be covered as well, and this is one of them. And this is something that happens far more so nowadays than it would have 20, 30 years ago, but what happens if a publishing house where you've been published closes down? Now, this is something that's happened to quite a number of writers out there. That's largely because there was a huge boom, and there still is a huge boom, in small publishing houses. A handful of people with a computer and access to a print-on-demand company can become a publishing house in a matter of a couple of weeks. Whether you make a profit at it or not is a different story. But it happens. There are dozens of publishing houses that open up every single year. In fact, when I started, there were only 1,100 English language publishing houses in the world, based on the Duotrope database. And last month, I think they crossed the 4,700 mark. So that's more than a fourfold increase. That's quite a bit. But it also means that a lot of these publishing houses don't last. A good chunk of them close down. So basically, here's what you want to consider. Look at your contract. You've published a story, you have a contract. The contract is good for a certain amount of time, usually. And it's usually a 2-year period for most of the contracts that I've seen the people I've worked with produce. So check your contract. If the publishers have closed down before the contract, but after the contract has lapsed, pardon me, you got nothing to worry about. If the contract has lapsed, it's no longer legally in effect. You can take your story anywhere you like, get it published somewhere else. I've done that. I've actually taken stories that I've published through publishing houses that have closed down, and I'm publishing them through other functioning publishing houses. This is part of the game. All you need to know is make sure you let the new publishers know. As long as they know that they are republishing a story that was published by a publishing house that is now closed down, there's not going to be a problem. But make sure they know. If you don't let them know, there could be an issue. It also doesn't hurt to get in touch with your old editor from the closed publishing house and let them know that you're publishing your new story. It's an email, it takes 5 minutes, doesn't cost you a dime, and it's common courtesy. And who knows, maybe the old publishing house, even though they're closed down, they might have some connections that you might be able to take advantage of. Networking is a huge part of this business, and I'm going to be talking about that in future videos. So, if your contract has lapsed, you've got nothing to worry about. If your contract has not lapsed, there will most likely be some clauses. I'm not going to pull out any more contracts and read. I've put you through enough of that already. I apologize for the amount that I did read, but I do believe that it was necessary, if nothing else, just to help people, you guys out there, understand exactly what it is you're getting into when you publish. So, take a look at your contract. There will most likely be a clause in the contract that covers what happens if the publishing house closes down. You'll most likely get a check for whatever little amount you haven't been paid already, because it's usually, if a publishing house is closing down, and there's one of a couple possibilities. Either you've just received your last royalty check, in which case you're going to have like maybe 5 or 6 cents due you, or you're just about to get your next royalty check, in which case you're just going to get the royalty check and that's going to be it. But take a look at those clauses. Always keep copies of your contracts. Always read the submission page information. Everything that you need to know about what would happen if the publishing house closes down is going to be on one of those two. And if it's not, send an email to your editor. Ask them. Ask them what's going on. Never hurts to do that. One of the best things you can do is develop a good rapport with your editors. If you have a good rapport with these folks, you can feel comfortable. I'm on a first-name basis with all my editors. And they're all great people. I have yet to meet someone who's an editor of one of these small publishing houses who is anything other than a really nice, friendly individual who is sincere and wants to help you, the author, as much as they want to help themselves, the publisher. And like I've said before, it's a one-hand washes the other. You work with them, they work with you. You help each other. I have yet to meet an editor that's a bad person. They're all great people. And most of them are also writers, so they understand what you're going through as an author. So if it's not in the contract and it's not in the submission page, send them an email. Doesn't hurt. Never hurts. All right. There's one last thing I got to say on this particular topic, and some people have done this. I think it's a mistake. Just because the publishing house closes down does not mean that those stories were not published. They were published. They went through an editorial process. An editor looked over them. You worked with an editor. They went to print. You signed a contract. You are still a published author. So I've had some people who published 1 or 2 stories. Publishing house closed down. They went, oh, I'm not published anymore. You're still published. The publishing house might have closed down, but if you go to another publishing house and say, hey, Mr. Editor, or Mrs. Editor, Miss Editor, Ms. Editor, editor person, I was published with X, Y, and Z publishing house. They closed down, but I still have these great stories. Interested? They're not going to look at you and go, you're unpublished. They know that you've gone through the editorial process. They know you have worked with an editor. They know you have gone through all the stages and you worked well enough with people in the past to get a story published. That's what most editors are concerned with. That's what they want to see in a published author. Or in an author, period, the end. They want to know that they can work with you. This is something I'm going to touch on in the future with other videos, because the process, the editorial process, which is really, really simple and straightforward, can make a lot of people go crazy. And that's why many publishing houses say that they prefer already established authors. Some are open to new authors, people who've never been published before. But most want an established author. And for the basic reason of you've gone through the editorial process. But I'll cover that in a future video. Anyway, that was the last point I wanted to make about this. But this is something you need to know. If you're going to get into publishing, if you're going to become an author, and you are planning on making money at this, you need to understand how to prepare yourself if one of your publishing houses closes down. Or gets bought out by a bigger publishing house that chooses not to continue. Actually, that's actually one last thing I can say. If your publishing house, instead of closing down, gets bought out by a bigger publishing house, that bigger publishing house will usually have the legal right to decide whether or not they want to continue your contract. More often than not, they'll terminate the contract if it's for something like an anthology, and they'll continue it for novels and novellas, because novels and novellas are bigger sellers and anthologies tend to not be. So if you're published if you've published a novel, oh man, tongue-tied today for some reason. If you've published a novel, you should be fine. If you're in an anthology, your contract will most likely be terminated in an instance like that, and they'll let you know. Or they will tell you, hey, we've terminated the contract, but there might be some stories we want to keep. We'll send you a new contract. That happens as well. That happened to me. One of the publishing house that closed down for me, they wound up getting bought out by a bigger publishing house, and it was a question of contracts. This is why contract law is important. That's why it's really important. Anyway, that's as much as I've got to say on this particular subject. There we go. Like and subscribe below. If you have any questions, email me. In the description below, you'll find a hyperlink to my website where you can get my email address, or you can go to my YouTube channel page to get my email address there. Send me a question. I will answer your questions. I have yet to get a question, so please send me questions. I would love to answer some questions on a video. It would be great. So, being said, cheers.